The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I sat in the glass conference room at Halverson and Price. Brett Conley, my boss, shuffled papers like he was dealing cards. His face wore that fake serious look he practiced in the mirror. "Carla, we're making some changes," he said, not looking at me. "Your department is redundant." The word hit me like a slap. 11 years. 11 years of building systems, maintaining client relationships, keeping this place running. I watched Brett's mouth move, explaining budget cuts and streamlining. My mind went quiet, not shocked quiet, calculating quiet. "We're offering a generous severance," he continued, sliding a folder across the table. 3 months' pay. I picked up the folder. My hands didn't shake. Brett probably expected tears or anger. Instead, I opened it, read the terms, and nodded. "I'll need a reference letter," I said calmly. Brett blinked. "Of course, absolutely." I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and shook his hand. His palm was sweaty. Mine wasn't. "Thank you for the opportunity," I said. As I walked out, I caught my reflection in the glass door. I looked the same as always, composed, professional, invisible. Brett had no idea what he'd just done. The next morning, Brett called an all-hands meeting. I wasn't there anymore, obviously, but my friend Sarah texted me everything. "We're entering a new era of efficiency," Brett announced, pacing like a CEO from some business movie. "By eliminating redundancies, we'll boost our profit margins by 15%. The staff nodded. They had to. Nobody wanted to be next. Brett introduced my replacement, a temp named Madison who looked fresh out of college. She had bright eyes and a notebook full of questions nobody could answer. "Madison will handle all compliance matters," Brett said. "She's very eager to learn." Sarah sent me a photo. Madison looked terrified. That afternoon, Madison accidentally deleted the shared compliance folder I'd maintained for our biggest client, Kessler Logistics. It contained 11 years of safety protocols, audit records, and regulatory updates. Brett didn't know yet. The system was set to auto-backup every 3 days. I'd changed it to weekly backups last month, after a server crash. The next backup wasn't scheduled until Friday. Madison tried to restore the folder but couldn't find the backup location. She spent 2 hours clicking through folders before giving up. I was at home, watering my tomatoes, when Sarah called. "She deleted everything," Sarah whispered. I smiled at my garden. "That's unfortunate." 2 days later, a safety auditor showed up at Kessler's main logistics center. Routine inspection. He found a minor violation, some paperwork missing from a refrigerated transport unit. In the old days, I would have handled this in 10 minutes. I kept copies of everything. I knew which forms went where and who to call. But I wasn't there anymore. The auditor wrote up the violation and sent it to Kessler's compliance team. They immediately forwarded it to Halverson and Price, asking for the updated safety protocol documentation. Madison panicked. She called Brett, who called the IT department, who called Sarah. "Where are the compliance files?" Brett demanded. "Carla maintained those," Sarah said carefully. "Well, where did she keep them?" "In the folder Madison deleted." The silence on the phone lasted 10 seconds. Then Brett started yelling. Meanwhile, Kessler's compliance manager, Linda Voss, was getting impatient. She'd worked with me for years. She trusted me to handle things quickly and correctly. When Halverson didn't respond within their usual 2-hour window, Linda picked up the phone. "This is unusual," she told her supervisor. "Carla always responds immediately." Her supervisor frowned. "Maybe you should call her directly." Linda tried my work number. Disconnected. She tried my work email. Bounced back. That's when she called Halverson's main line and learned I'd been let go. I was reading in my kitchen when my personal phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code. Kessler's headquarters. "Carla, this is Linda Voss from Kessler. I heard about what happened." I set down my book. "Hello, Linda. Yes, I'm no longer with Halverson. I'm so sorry. Listen, we have a situation. There's a compliance issue and we can't get the documentation we need. Do you happen to have copies of the safety protocols?" I did. I kept personal copies of everything, just good practice. But I paused. "I'm not sure I should get involved," I said. "I don't work there anymore." "I understand, but Carla, you know how important this is. We've got auditors breathing down our necks, and your replacement doesn't seem to know the system." I walked to my file cabinet. My personal archive was 3 times more organized than anything I'd left at Halverson. "I can send you a copy of the standard protocol," I said. but going forward you'll need to work with Madison. Thank you so much. You're a lifesaver. I sent the file within 10 minutes. Linda probably thought I was being helpful. I was really just buying time. The protocol I sent was correct but incomplete. It was the basic template, not the customized version I'd developed specifically for Kessler's unique operations. It would solve their immediate problem, but create bigger ones later. Brett was having the worst week of his career. The temp was useless, the files were gone, and now Kessler was asking questions he couldn't answer. He called an emergency meeting with his remaining staff. "We need to rebuild the compliance system," he announced. "How hard can it be?" Sarah raised her hand. "Brett, Carla built that system over 11 years. She knew every regulation, every client requirement, We'll figure it out," Brett interrupted. "We're smart people." He assigned different staff members to different clients. Sarah got stuck with Kessler, the biggest and most demanding account. "Just maintain what Carla was doing," Brett said. "What exactly was she doing?" Sarah asked. Brett stared at her. He genuinely didn't know. That evening, Brett sat in his office, scrolling through my old emails. He was looking for some kind of instruction manual, some explanation of how I'd managed everything so smoothly. My emails were professional but brief. Compliance updated. Issue resolved. Kessler satisfied. No details, no process documentation, no backup plans. Brett opened my desk drawers, empty. I'd taken everything personal and left everything else exactly where it belonged, in my head. He drafted an email to Madison. "Did Carla train you on escalation protocol?" Madison's response came back in 5 minutes. "What's escalation protocol?" Brett put his head in his hands. I wasn't desperate. I'd been saving money for 11 years, living below my means, preparing for exactly this kind of situation. My severance package gave me breathing room. Still, I took a few interviews. Word travels fast in our industry. 3 companies called me within a week. The first was a small freight startup downtown. They offered me decent money and the chance to build a compliance department from scratch. "We'd love to have someone with your experience," the CEO said. "Kessler speaks very highly of you." I smiled but declined. I'm exploring my options. The second interview was with a mid-size firm that competed directly with Halverson. They practically begged me to bring Kessler with me. "We know you have a relationship with Linda Voss," their VP said. "If you could facilitate an introduction." I politely declined again. The third interview was different. A boutique consulting firm that specialized in compliance strategy. They didn't want me to steal clients. They wanted me to fix broken systems. "We work with companies that are in crisis," the partner explained. "Sometimes they've fired the wrong people and need help cleaning up the mess." I liked their approach but wasn't ready to commit. That evening, Linda Voss called my personal number again. "Carla, I have a question. Do you do consulting work?" I set down my tea. "What kind of consulting?" "The kind where you save our account from complete disaster." Linda and I met at a coffee shop near Kessler's headquarters. She looked stressed, more stressed than I'd ever seen her. "Halverson is falling apart," she said quietly. "The temp they hired doesn't understand basic compliance requirements. We've had 3 more violations this week." I sipped my latte. "That's concerning. Carla, we need help. Real help. Would you consider a short-term consulting contract? We'll pay you directly to oversee compliance until they get their act together." It was a generous offer. More than generous, it was exactly what I'd been hoping for. "I'd need some protections," I said. "Non-disclosure agreement, no solicitation clause." "Of course." "The NDA isn't to protect you," I clarified. "It's to prevent Halverson from contacting me directly during the contract period." Linda raised her eyebrows. "You don't want them to know you're consulting for us?" "I want them to realize they need to solve their own problems." We spent an hour working out the details. Kessler would pay me triple my old salary for a 3-month contract. I would provide compliance oversight but work exclusively through Linda. As I signed the contract, Linda smiled. "Halverson has no idea what they lost, do they?" I smiled back. "They're about to find out." The next morning, I walked into Kessler's headquarters as a consultant. Same building I'd visited hundreds of times, but now I was on the other side of the table. I set up in a conference room and started reviewing Halverson's recent compliance reports. They were a disaster. Within 48 hours of my consulting contract starting, Linda decided to conduct a surprise internal audit of Halverson's systems. It was her right as the client and my suggestion as the consultant. We need to understand the scope of the problem, I told her. The audit was brutal. Kessler's team found violations dating back 3 weeks, some hidden by Madison's panicked attempts to fix her mistakes, others simply ignored because nobody understood the requirements. The refrigerated transport issue was worse than anyone realized. Not only was the paperwork missing, but the temperature logs showed potential spoilage of $200,000 worth of pharmaceutical products. A missed recall notice had left contaminated food products in circulation for 5 days. Safety protocols for hazardous materials were outdated by 6 months. I compiled the findings into a comprehensive report. 23 pages of violations, system failures, and compliance gaps. Linda read it twice. This is unacceptable. It gets worse, I said. These are just the issues we can see. There are probably more problems buried in their system. That afternoon, Kessler's legal department sent a formal notice to Halverson and Price. Unless all compliance issues are resolved within 7 days, Kessler Logistics will terminate our contract effective immediately. The contract was worth $1.2 million annually. Brett received the notice at 4:47 p.m. on a Friday. By 5:15 p.m., he was calling my personal phone. "Carla, thank God. Listen, we need to talk." Brett's voice was different. Humble, almost desperate. "Hello, Brett," I said calmly. I was cooking dinner, stirring pasta sauce while he panicked. "Look, I know things ended awkwardly, but we're facing a situation here. Kessler is threatening to terminate. I was hoping you could provide some input on how to fix things." "I see. I'm authorized to offer you a generous consulting retainer. Name your price. We just need your expertise for a few weeks." I let the silence stretch. The pasta sauce bubbled quietly. "Brett, I'm bound by a non-disclosure agreement with another client. I can't discuss Halverson's business." "What? With who?" "I can't discuss that either." "Carla, please. We worked together for 11 years. I'm asking for help." I turned off the stove. "I'm sorry, Brett. You'll have to manage without me." I hung up. Then I blocked his number. 20 minutes later, Sarah texted me, "Brett is losing his mind. He's called an emergency meeting for Monday morning." I smiled and served myself dinner. The pasta was perfect. Monday morning brought chaos to Halverson and Price. The compliance failures were cascading like dominoes. A warehouse team leader named Mike Rodriguez quit after being blamed for a system failure he'd actually warned Brett about 2 weeks earlier. In his resignation email, Mike wrote, "This place has been a disaster since you fired Carla." That same day, a missed recall notice resulted in contaminated products staying on shelves. The FDA sent a formal warning letter to both Halverson and Kessler. Madison tried to handle the FDA response but didn't understand the terminology. She sent back a form letter that actually made things worse. By Tuesday, Kessler had received 3 more compliance violations from different auditing agencies. By Wednesday, Brett was fielding angry calls from Kessler's CEO. By Thursday, the board of directors at Halverson demanded a formal incident review. Sarah kept me updated through text messages. Board meeting scheduled. Brett looks like he hasn't slept. Madison crying in the bathroom. I was having the most peaceful week I'd had in years. I worked from Kessler's quiet conference room, earning 3 times my old salary. Friday afternoon, Linda stopped by my temporary office. "The 7-day deadline is tomorrow," she said. "Any word from Halverson?" "Nothing substantial," I said. Linda nodded grimly. "Prepare the termination notice." Brett finally swallowed his pride and called his old mentor, Frank Morrison. Frank had run operations at Halverson for 20 years before retiring. He was the one who'd originally hired me. They met for coffee Saturday morning. "I'm in trouble, Frank," Brett admitted. "We lost our compliance specialist, and now our biggest client is threatening to leave." Frank stirred his coffee slowly. "Who was your compliance specialist?" "Carla Merritt. Had to let her go for budget reasons." Frank stopped stirring. "You fired Carla?" "It was a business decision. Her salary was." "Brett, you don't fire the person who keeps the ship from sinking. Carla wasn't just an employee. She was the system." That afternoon, Brett went back to the office and pulled my personnel file. 11 years of perfect reviews. 0 compliance violations under my watch. Commendations from 5 different clients. The file contained detailed documentation of every system I'd built, every process I'd improved, every crisis I'd prevented. But the documentation was just summaries. The actual knowledge, how to navigate the systems, who to call, what worked, all of that had walked out the door with me. Brett closed the file and stared at his computer screen. He'd saved $5,000 a month by firing me. He was about to lose $100,000 a month by losing Kessler. Meanwhile, I was building something new. Kessler was so impressed with my consulting work that they introduced me to their expansion partners, 3 companies looking to grow into new markets. All of them needed compliance guidance. All of them were willing to pay premium rates for expertise. By the end of my second week consulting, I had 3 potential clients and a waiting list. One of the companies, Morrison Freight, was actively bidding on contracts that would compete directly with Halverson and Price. During our strategy meeting, Morrison's CEO asked me about industry trends. There seems to be some instability in the market, he said. Companies losing major clients due to compliance issues. I nodded professionally. Compliance is often undervalued until something goes wrong. Would you be interested in helping us put together a transition plan for clients who might be looking for more reliable service? I spent the weekend drafting a comprehensive transition strategy. It was efficient, thorough, and devastating to any company that lost clients due to compliance failures. Morrison Freight loved it. If Morrison Freight won all the bids, Halverson would lose nearly $2 million in annual revenue. All because Brett wanted to save $60,000 a year on my salary. Monday morning, Brett faced the board of directors at Halverson and Price. He'd prepared a presentation downplaying the Kessler situation. We're experiencing some temporary compliance challenges, he began. Nothing that can't be resolved with additional training. Board member Janet Walsh interrupted him. Brett, I received some concerning information over the weekend. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a redacted copy of my transition report, the one detailing how smoothly clients could switch to Morrison Freight. This report suggests that losing compliance expertise can be catastrophic for logistics companies, Janet continued. Brett's mouth went dry. Where did you get this? A colleague forwarded it to me. It's being circulated as an example of industry best practices. Another board member, David Chen, leaned forward. Brett, help me understand something. Carla Merritt maintained our compliance systems for 11 years, correct? Yes. And you terminated her employment to reduce costs? It was part of a broader efficiency initiative. How much did you save? Brett hesitated. Approximately $60,000 annually. And how much revenue are we at risk of losing if Kessler terminates their contract? Brett's voice was barely a whisper. About $1.2 million annually. The boardroom fell silent. Janet Walsh closed her folder. You fired the person who kept us contract compliant for 11 years? Tuesday morning, Brett's desperation reached new heights. He drafted an official proposal to bring me back as an executive contractor. The offer was impressive. $15,000 per month retainer, executive-level title, complete autonomy over compliance operations, and the ability to name my own terms. It was more than double my old salary. He sent it to my personal email with a subject line, Urgent, Partnership Opportunity. I forwarded the proposal to Kessler's legal team. This is a potential conflict of interest, I wrote. Please advise. The response came back within an hour. Under the terms of your NDA, accepting any offer from Halverson would breach your contract with us. However, we'd be willing to extend your consulting contract and match any competing offer. Kessler's counteroffer was even better than Brett's. They wanted to lock me in for 6 months at $18,000 per month. I sent Brett a polite declination. Thank you for the generous offer, but I'm committed to other clients at this time. Brett called me immediately. The call went to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. That evening, Brett showed up at the coffee shop where Linda and I had met. Brett approached her table. Linda, we need to talk about Carla. Linda looked up calmly. I'm sorry, who are you? Security escorted Brett out. The next day, Brett tried a different approach. He waited outside the logistics conference where I was attending a panel discussion. When I walked out of the building, he approached me directly. Carla, please, just 5 minutes. I stopped and looked at him. He looked terrible, rumpled suit, tired eyes, desperate expression. "Hello, Brett. I know you're consulting for Kessler. Just tell me what it will take to fix this." I smiled politely. "I can't discuss my consulting work. I'll triple the offer. I'll give you equity. I'll make you a partner." I started walking toward my car. "Brett, you made your decision when you fired me." He followed me. "That was a mistake. I admit it. I was wrong." I stopped at my car door. "You weren't wrong about the budget, Brett. You were wrong about value." I got in my car and drove away. He stood in the parking lot, watching me leave. 3 hours later, Kessler's legal team filed an NDA breach notice against Halverson and Price. Brett's public approach violated the non-solicitation clause in my consulting contract. The penalty was $75,000. Halverson's legal budget for the entire quarter was $50,000. While Brett was spiraling, I was building alliances inside his own company. Mike Rodriguez, the warehouse team leader who'd quit, reached out to me through LinkedIn. We met for coffee. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "Your resignation letter gave me the courage to speak up about what was really happening." "I didn't write a resignation letter," I said. "I was terminated." Mike's eyes widened. "That's not what they told us. They said you left for a better opportunity." I showed him the termination paperwork. His anger was immediate and visible. "They fired you to hire that temp?" "Budget cuts," I said simply. Mike pulled out his phone. "I still have access to the company internal system. Want to see something interesting?" He showed me a memo dated 3 weeks before my termination. The subject line read, "Cost Reduction Initiative Target Positions." My name was at the top of the list. "They planned this," Mike said. "This wasn't about performance or redundancy. This was about money." I asked Mike to forward me the memo. He hesitated for about 2 seconds, then hit send. That evening, I shared the memo with 3 former Halverson employees who'd reached out to me over the past few weeks. All of them had been loyal to me and felt betrayed by how I'd been treated. All of them still had friends inside the company. By morning, the memo was circulating through Halverson's entire staff. The subject line of the internal forwards was simple. They planned it. The following week, I received an unexpected invitation. The Regional Logistics Conference wanted me to deliver a keynote speech about compliance management. It was a prestigious opportunity. 300 industry professionals would attend, including executives from every major logistics company in the region. But I declined. Instead, I recommended Sarah, my former colleague, who was struggling to maintain compliance systems at Halverson. Sarah Martinez would provide valuable insights from the front lines of logistics management, I wrote to the conference organizers. Sarah was thrilled. Her speech was titled, "What Happens When Experience Walks Out the Door." She didn't mention Halverson by name, but everyone knew exactly what company she was talking about. The speech was recorded and posted online. Within a week, it had 50,000 views. In the Q&A session, someone asked, "What would you do differently if you were in charge?" Sarah's answer was devastating. "I would never fire the person who kept the company compliant for 11 years to save a few $1,000s a month." The audience applauded for 30 seconds. Brett was in the audience. He left during the applause. 2 weeks after my termination, Kessler made it official. They sent a formal notice terminating their contract with Halverson and Price. Linda asked me to review the termination letter before sending it. I made sure every word was precise and legally sound. The final paragraph read, "Kessler Logistics requires partners who prioritize compliance excellence and maintain experienced staff capable of meeting complex regulatory requirements. Halverson and Price no longer meets these standards." The letter was copied to Halverson's board of directors and their other major clients. Brett received the notice at 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday. At 2:45 p.m., he called an emergency board meeting. At 4:15 p.m., Brett was asked to prepare his resignation letter. By 5 p.m., the news was spreading through the industry. Halverson and Price had lost their biggest client due to compliance failures. Morrison Freight's CEO called me that evening. "We heard about Kessler," he said. "Are you interested in a permanent position? We're about to get very busy." I smiled. "Let's talk." The domino effect was swift and merciless. Within 48 hours of Kessler's termination notice, 2 other clients requested compliance audits of their Halverson contracts. Both audits revealed significant issues. Morrison Freight, armed with my transition plan, submitted competitive bids for all 3 accounts. Halverson's revenue projections plummeted by 40%. The board called an emergency meeting to discuss bankruptcy protection. An investor who'd been considering a $2 million expansion loan withdrew his offer, citing leadership instability. Brett was officially demoted to regional advisor, a glorified sales role with no authority. His replacement was Jennifer Huang, a former colleague who'd been mentored by me at a previous company. Jennifer's first act was to call me. "Carla, would you be willing to consult on rebuilding our compliance systems?" I was polite but firm. "Jennifer, I have existing commitments that prevent me from working with Halverson." After we hung up, I sent her a text. "Congratulations on the promotion. You'll do great." She replied, "I'll let you know if we ever figure out how to fix what Brett broke." As Halverson crumbled, I was building something new. Morrison Freight offered me a partnership position, Director of Compliance Strategy with equity and the authority to hire my own team. My first hire was Mike Rodriguez, the warehouse manager who'd leaked the termination memo. My second hire was Sarah, who'd grown tired of trying to fix unfixable problems at Halverson. My third hire was Madison, the temp who'd replaced me. She was actually very smart, just untrained and thrown into an impossible situation. "You want to hire me?" Madison asked when I called her. "After everything that happened? You made mistakes because you weren't given proper training. That's not your fault." Within 6 weeks, I had a team of 5 people, all committed to building compliance systems the right way. Our first external client was a small family-owned logistics firm that had been struggling with regulatory requirements. "I want to work with people who understand what really matters," their CEO told me. His account was small, only $50,000 annually, but it was the beginning of something bigger. I told him, "Pay it forward. Help other small companies avoid what happened to Halverson." 3 months after my termination, I had lunch with Jennifer Huang, Brett's replacement at Halverson. She'd been trying to repair the damage for weeks, but was struggling with systems I'd built over 11 years. "How did you keep track of everything?" she asked. "I found 17 different spreadsheets, but half the links are broken." I smiled. The spreadsheets were just backup. Most of it was relationship-based. "What do you mean?" I knew which auditor preferred which format. I knew which client had special requirements. I knew which regulations were changing before they were officially announced. Jennifer looked exhausted. "Brett never documented any of that. Brett never knew any of that." She sighed. "We lost Morrison's bid for the Peterson account yesterday. Our compliance package was 3 weeks late." I nodded sympathetically. "That's unfortunate. Carla, can I ask you something, off the record?" "Of course. Do you think we can recover from this?" I considered carefully. "Jennifer, you're smart and capable. If anyone can fix this, it's you. But it's going to take years to rebuild what was lost." Walking back to my car, I passed Halverson's office building. Through the lobby windows, I saw Brett looking confused and lost. I walked by without stopping. A month later, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a handwritten note. "Dear Carla, I wanted to thank you for what you did. I know you didn't intend it this way, but your situation helped save my job. When the board saw what happened after you were fired, they realized that experience matters more than cost savings. They canceled the layoffs they'd planned for our department. I can't sign my name because I still work here, but I wanted you to know that your sacrifice helped other people. Thank you. A friend." I read the letter twice, then filed it in my personal folder. That afternoon, I called the anonymous letter writers company. I'd recognized the letterhead. "I'm offering compliance consulting services," I told their HR director. "Small companies, fair rates, focus on preventing problems rather than fixing disasters." They became my 4th client. Their CEO understood that firing experienced people to save money usually costs more in the long run. "We'd rather pay for expertise than pay for mistakes," she told me. Within 2 months, they referred me to 3 other companies. All of them wanted to avoid making the same mistake as Halverson. 6 months after my termination, I had a routine business meeting downtown. As I walked through the lobby, I saw a familiar figure. Brett was sitting in the waiting area, holding a portfolio and checking his watch nervously. He was interviewing for a job. I recognized the company, a mid-tier logistics firm that specialized in small accounts. Nothing like the major contracts he'd managed at Halverson. He looked older, more tired, less confident than the man who'd fired me in that fluorescent-lit conference room. I walked past him toward the elevator. He didn't notice me at first, then did a double take. Our eyes met for a brief moment. He started to stand, probably to approach me, but I'd already entered the elevator. As the doors closed, I saw him sink back into his chair. The elevator climbed toward my meeting on the 15th floor. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, no pity. Just the quiet peace of someone who'd moved beyond their past. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda Voss. Heard Morrison Freight landed the Peterson account. Congratulations. I smiled and typed back, just good planning. A year later, I was invited to participate in a federal task force on logistics compliance standards. The invitation came through the Department of Transportation, recognizing my expertise in developing practical compliance systems. The task force was charged with updating federal regulations to reflect modern logistics challenges, while ensuring small companies could still compete effectively. I accepted with one condition: keep the language simple. Companies shouldn't need lawyers to understand compliance requirements. The first meeting was held in Washington, D.C., 20 experts from across the country, representing different aspects of the logistics industry. During introductions, I simply said, Carla Merritt, independent compliance consultant. I help companies avoid expensive mistakes. The task force spent 6 months developing new standards. My contribution focused on practical implementation. The final recommendations included mandatory compliance training and penalties for companies that fired compliance staff without adequate replacement plans. One section was titled, The Cost of False Economy in Compliance Management. The Halverson case study was featured prominently, though names were changed. Brett's decision to fire me had become a textbook example of how not to manage compliance operations. Every logistics company would now be required to maintain qualified compliance staff and document their systems properly. Today, I work from my home office, surrounded by my garden and my books. My calendar is full but flexible. My bank account is healthy, but not my primary concern. Morrison Freight offered me a permanent executive position with a 6-figure salary and full benefits. I declined. I preferred the independence of consulting. My client list includes 12 companies, ranging from small family operations to mid-size regional firms. All of them understand that compliance isn't a cost center, it's business insurance. None of them have ever lost a major client due to compliance failures. Brett eventually found work at a small logistics company in another state. He manages local accounts and has no compliance responsibilities. Halverson and Price recovered, slowly. Jennifer Huang rebuilt their compliance systems from scratch. It took them 3 years to regain the revenue they'd lost. This morning, I received an email from a young compliance officer at a transportation company. She'd read about my work and wanted advice about handling pressure from executives to cut compliance costs. They say my department is too expensive, she wrote. How do I prove my value before it's too late? I spent an hour crafting a detailed response about documenting impact, building relationships, and protecting both yourself and your company. At the end, I added, remember, they never see you coming until you're gone. Make sure they understand what they'll lose before they lose it. The tomatoes were coming in beautifully this year.